Frederick, Colorado, August 13th, 2018. It began like any other warm summer morning. Birds chirped outside neat suburban homes. Children's bikes leaned against freshly painted garages, and the air smelled faintly of cut grass. But behind one of those doors, something was terribly wrong. And the first person to sense it wasn't the police, it was a friend. And before I forget, drop the name of your city in the comments, so I can send you a special shout-out in the next video. Today's shout-out goes to James Nicole from South Africa. I am so glad you're enjoying our stories. Remember, to be featured in a shout-out, you need to be a subscriber. And hey, hitting that like button only takes a second, but it really helps us a lot. It was just past 8:30 a.m. when Nicole Atkinson, a close friend of Shanann Watts, dialed 911. Shanann had missed a doctor's appointment. Her phone was off, and worst of all, her car was still in the garage. Nicole's voice, captured in the 911 recording, was steady but urgent. "I'm worried about my friend. She's pregnant, she has 2 little girls, and this isn't like her." The dispatcher asked routine questions, but Nicole's tone carried a growing dread, that kind of dread that makes even professionals sit a little straighter in their chairs. Police were dispatched for a welfare check. At first, it sounded like just another call. Maybe a medical emergency. Maybe someone overslept. No one could have guessed that what awaited officers at 2825 Saratoga Trail would become one of the most infamous crime scenes in modern American history. Officer Scott Coonrod was the first to respond. As he approached the house, Nicole and Shanann's concerned friends were already gathered outside, pacing nervously. Shanann's white Lexus sat quietly in the garage, still loaded with the child car seats. The front door was locked. No sound came from inside. Coonrod knocked. No answer. He circled to the back, checked windows. Nothing. Then came Chris, watched Shanann's husband pulling up in his truck, wearing work clothes, acting surprised. His demeanor was calm. Too calm. Nicole watched closely. She knew Shanann well, and something felt off. The officers asked Chris for permission to enter the house. He agreed, fumbling with keys. The moment the door swung open, they stepped into a quiet, eerily still home. Toys were scattered, lights were off, and Shanann's purse, phone, keys, and medication inside lay abandoned near the entrance. As Coonrod's flashlight swept across the hallway, he felt a strange stillness, like walking into a house where time had stopped. Upstairs, Shanann's bed was neatly made. There were no signs of struggle, but also no sign of Shanann or her 2 daughters, Bella 4 and Celeste 3. Chris walked around, pointing things out casually, mentioning how Shanann might have taken the kids to a friend's house. But Nicole interrupted, telling the officer flatly she would never leave without her car seats. Never. That single statement hit like a stone in still water. Something wasn't right. Back inside, officers noticed little red flags piling up. Shanann's shoes, the ones she always wore, were by the door. Her phone was found tucked between couch cushions. Her wedding ring was left on the nightstand. It was as if she had vanished into thin air, leaving everything behind. Meanwhile, Bodycam footage captured Chris's behavior in real time. He laughed nervously, paced inconsistently, and spoke in a detached manner. Nicole whispered to the officer that this wasn't how he normally acted. Still, no obvious crime scene had been found. No blood, no forced entry, no screams, just a creeping sense of dread growing by the minute. Later that day, detectives arrived. A K-9 unit was brought in to sweep the house. The dogs roamed rooms quietly. Then suddenly, one sat down abruptly at the foot of Shanann's bed, a classic indicator of detecting human scent. Investigators began to suspect they weren't dealing with a simple disappearance. Chris's neighbors were questioned. One of them had a security camera facing the street. When the footage was played back for Chris, his reaction was visibly tense. The video showed him backing his work truck into the driveway early that morning, unusual behavior, according to the neighbor. After Chris left, the neighbor turned to officers and whispered, "He's not acting right. I've never seen him like that." By evening, the Watts family home had transformed from a quiet suburban house into the epicenter of a growing investigation. Police tape fluttered in the Colorado breeze. TV crews were setting up across the street. And inside the house, every drawer, closet, and room was photographed and logged. For the officers who entered that home on August 13th, it started as a routine welfare check. But deep down, many of them already felt it. Something horrific had happened here. They just didn't know how deep the darkness went. As night fell over Frederick, Colorado, questions multiplied. Where was Shanann? Where were Bella and Celeste? Why had Chris acted so strangely? The investigation had only just begun, but the shocking answers were already hidden in plain sight. August 14th, 2018. What began as a missing persons case was about to turn into something far darker. The officers who stepped into the Watts home that morning had no idea that within 48 hours, they'd be standing face to face with one of the most disturbing truths they'd ever encounter. While search teams combed the neighborhood and volunteers handed out flyers, detectives zeroed in on Chris Watts. Something about his story didn't add up. He claimed Shanann had told him she was taking the kids to a friend's house after an emotional conversation. But investigators noted glaring inconsistencies. There was no friend expecting them. Her car was still in the garage, and surveillance footage showed no one leaving the house after Chris had gone to work that morning. Inside the Watts home, officers began documenting every detail. They sprayed luminol to check for traces of blood. They examined bedding, carpets, and walls. But the house remained disturbingly pristine, almost too clean. Then came the smells. One officer later recounted how a faint, unnatural odor lingered in the master bedroom. It wasn't blood, but something chemical, mixed with the sterile scent of freshly washed sheets. It was like the house was holding its breath, waiting for the truth to be uncovered. That same day, Chris Watts agreed to give a TV interview on his front porch. If you're out there, just come back. Shanann, Bella, Celeste, if you're hearing this, please just come back home. He rocked side to side, avoided direct eye contact, and spoke in carefully measured sentences. To the public, it looked strange. To experienced investigators, it screamed deception. Behind the scenes, the police were already closing in. They asked Chris to come in for a polygraph test. He agreed, confidently. I'll take anything, he told them. The test results were devastating. The examiner leaned in and said flatly, "There's no way you pass this. You know that, right?" Chris stared blankly. His mask was starting to crack. Meanwhile, search efforts expanded beyond the house. Investigators began reviewing Chris's work records. He was employed by Anadarko Petroleum, working on oil fields in rural Weld County. According to his logs, he had driven directly to a remote site called CERVI 319 on the morning of August 13th. This was a critical lead. CERVI 319 was isolated, surrounded by dusty roads and massive oil tanks, the perfect place to hide something you didn't want found. Officers were dispatched to the site. As they approached, they noticed fresh tire tracks leading toward a cluster of oil tanks. The silence of the oil field was eerie, broken only by the sound of wind whipping across the open plains. No one could have prepared them for what they were about to find. Back at the police station, Chris's polygraph interrogation escalated. Investigators played their cards carefully, using psychological tactics to chip away at his story. Eventually, he asked to speak with his father. In that room, the mask finally shattered. With his father sitting across from him, Chris mumbled that Shanann had hurt the kids, and he had lost it. It was a lie, but it was the first crack. Interrogators re-entered the room. Chris exhaled deeply, and then he confessed coldly. "I killed her, and I put them at the oil site." The confession sent a chill through the interrogation room. Chris explained, in a detached and calculated tone, how he had strangled Shanann in their bed after a conversation about their failing marriage. Then, horrifyingly, he smothered his 2 daughters in the back seat of his truck, one after the other, as they drove toward the oil field. The officers listening to this confession later described it as one of the most emotionally devastating moments of their careers. On August 16th, law enforcement arrived at the oil site with cadaver dogs, crime scene techs, and heavy machinery. The air was dry, the sun merciless. As they walked toward the tanks, the dogs suddenly stiffened their bodies, pointing toward a shallow patch of earth. They had found Shanann's body, hastily buried in a shallow grave. A few yards away stood two massive oil tanks. Inside those tanks, officers discovered the bodies of Bella and Celeste, submerged in crude oil. The odor was overpowering, a sickening mix of petroleum and death. Even seasoned investigators struggled to keep their composure. For those officers, that moment would stay with them forever. The heat, the smell, the silence, and the unbearable sight of two innocent children discarded like they didn't matter. Every movement at the site was documented. Hazmat suits were required due to the toxicity of the oil. Recovery teams worked methodically, carefully draining the tanks to retrieve the remains. It took hours. By the time the sun began to set, the site had transformed into a crime scene of unimaginable horror. The case was no longer a mystery. It was a tragedy of cold calculation. If you've made it this far, you're clearly as drawn into this case as we are. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because the next part will take you inside the courtroom and reveal why this case still haunts law enforcement to this day. And if you're new here, welcome, you're part of the family now. As the night fell over Weld County, officers stood silently by their vehicles. The gravity of what they'd uncovered was setting in. Some stared at the stars. Others couldn't shake the image of those small oil tanks. They had seen violent crimes before, but this was different. It was methodical, emotionless, and it came from someone who was supposed to protect those victims. For the responding officers, the scene at CERVI 319 would become one of those moments that never leaves you. Long after the headlines fade, long after the cameras are gone, the smell, the sight, and the silence linger. By August 17, 2018, the town of Frederick, Colorado, was reeling. What began as a missing persons case had unraveled into a story so dark, so unthinkable, that would haunt everyone involved for years to come. The day after Chris Watts' confession, news broke publicly. Headlines blared across the country. Colorado father confesses to killing pregnant wife and daughters. The idyllic image of the Watts family, their smiling social media posts, their perfect suburban home, shattered overnight. Reporters crowded outside the house. Strangers left flowers, teddy bears, and handwritten notes on the front lawn. For the investigators and first responders, however, the real work had just begun. Detectives meticulously reconstructed the timeline. Sunday night, August 12th, Shanann returned home from a business trip at 1:48 a.m. Early Monday morning, Chris claimed they argued, but the reality was far worse. Between 2 o'clock and 5 a.m., he strangled Shanann in their bed. He then carried her body down the stairs, wrapped in a sheet, and loaded it into his work truck. Bella and Celeste were still alive. He placed them in the back seat with their mother's body beside them and drove 45 minutes to the oil site. Those details, uncovered through data, GPS, and Chris's own chilling words, revealed the true horror of what unfolded inside that house. Cell phone pings, doorbell camera footage, and work records lined up perfectly, exposing a carefully concealed timeline that Chris thought he could outsmart investigators with. He underestimated them. For detectives who walked through 2825 Saratoga Trail, these revelations made each photograph, each footprint, each innocuous household object suddenly scream with hidden meaning. The clean sheets upstairs were where Shanann's life ended. The garage door footage captured the final moments the girls were seen alive. The oil tanks became symbols of betrayal beyond comprehension. On November 6, 2018, Chris Watts stood in court and pleaded guilty to all 9 counts, including first-degree murder and unlawful termination of a pregnancy. His guilty plea spared him the death penalty at the request of Shanann's grieving parents. During sentencing, the judge described the crimes as perhaps the most inhumane and vicious crime I have handled in my career. The courtroom was silent as the district attorney recounted the murders in excruciating detail. Officers who had been at the house, the oil site, and the interrogation room sat quietly, reliving every second. Some had tears in their eyes. Others clenched their fists. It wasn't just another case. It was personal. Chris Watts received 5 life sentences without the possibility of parole, plus 48 years for the unlawful termination of Shanann's pregnancy and 36 years for tampering with the bodies. He was transferred to a maximum security prison in Wisconsin, where he remains to this day, a living reminder of a crime that defied human understanding. If this story has gripped you the way it did us, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a deep dive into cases that shook the world. Share this video with someone who follows true crime, because the more people who know these stories, the more we honor the victims. Even after the trial ended, the emotional weight of the case didn't fade for those who were there. Some 911 dispatchers later admitted they replayed Nicole Atkinson's initial call in their heads for months, wondering if there was anything they missed. The first officers on the scene described how they'd walk into other houses on future calls and flash back to that quiet, immaculate home in Frederick. One said he could still hear the hollow echo of his own footsteps on the Watts staircase. For the oil site team, the smell of petroleum was forever changed. Some couldn't drive past industrial tanks again without feeling physically sick. These weren't just professionals doing their jobs. They were humans standing in the aftermath of something truly evil. The Watts case quickly became a benchmark in law enforcement circles, not just for its brutality, but for how digital evidence, bodycam footage, and neighbor surveillance exposed the killer's lies in real time. It's now studied in criminal justice programs for its investigative precision and psychological complexity. It also stands as a cautionary tale. The perfect facade can hide unimaginable darkness. Netflix later released American Murder, The Family Next Door, using raw police footage and text to tell the story without a narrator letting the truth speak for itself. It became one of the platform's most chilling true crime documentaries. Shanann Watts was 34 years old. Bella was 4. Celeste was 3. And baby Nico was never given a chance to be born. Behind the headlines, these were real people loved, cherished, and stolen far too soon. For those who responded to the call, walked through the house, interrogated Chris, and uncovered the bodies, the case never really ends. It's something they carry quietly, tucked away in the corners of their memory. Some call it trauma. Others call it duty. But all of them agree on one thing. What we saw that day will stay with us forever. Thank you for watching. If you found this story as powerful as we did, leave a comment with your thoughts and let us know what case you'd like us to cover next. Stay curious and stay safe.